So that's arrays. What about objects? As I mentioned, objects are great for grouping data together. And you create objects with the curly braces here, and then you can have multiple key value pairs separated by commas in them. So let's create an object. Let's say we don't just want to add the number which we added to our log, but a more detailed log information package, if you will. Because the number alone, of course, doesn't tell us much. It would be interesting to log the result before we added the number, the operation itself, so that we can add items to the log, not just here, but on all these functions, and we can then just attach the information, whether that was an addition or a subtraction operation. And therefore, we need a more complex piece of data that we manage in the list. This is a great scenario for objects, because now we need to manage multiple pieces of data that are kind of related. And these pieces of data then, in turn, are managed as a list of these pieces of data, because we have multiple such actions. So here we could add a new constant, let's say, because I never plan on editing this, which I'll name log entry, and this should hold such an object, which you, as you learned, create by adding opening and closing curly braces. Now, of course, we also use curly braces here for creating the function, but that's different. Here, we used it after the function keyword, after the name of the function, and the list of parameters. This is a pattern JavaScript detects, which tells it, well, these curly braces should now hold the function body. On the other end here, we have no function keyword and nothing like that. Therefore, this tells JavaScript, since it's on the right side of an equal sign, where you always define the values for something, for a variable or for whatever you're working with, this tells JavaScript, okay, you want to create an object. Now, you can create an object like this, an empty object, but that's not too useful, arguably. Now, what you can do instead, of course, is you can add key value pairs. So pairs of identifiers and values which you store in these identifiers. Now, often you will write an object across multiple lines. That's not required. You can do it all in one line just for readability's sake. Often you split it across multiple lines, and then you can also, of course, indent to make it more readable. And here you could, for example, add, let's say, operation key. The key names are totally up to you. You could name this op or operation or whatever you want, and then separated with a colon, you add the value. Now, values can be anything. Can be strings, numbers, arrays, or other objects. You can also have objects in objects. So here as an operation, I'll store a string which says add. So this is kind of my identifier, you could say, that when we see that log entry later in the output, we see, okay, that was an operation where we added two numbers. Now, of course, I then also want to store these two numbers. So I have my, let's say, number 1, or my previous result, so the result before the operation. You can, again, use any key name you want here. And then again, separated with a colon, the value. Here, the value, of course, should be a number, and it should be my initial result, to be precise, because that is my result before we performed this operation and we added the number. Now, we also, of course, need the value which we added. So we could name this number or operand, so kind of the value we added to the previous result. I'll name it number. And here again, separated by a colon, we now set a value to this identifier. And here, that would be my entered number, because that is the number I added to the previous result. And maybe we also want to add the result after the operation here in our log entry. So that could be the result or new result or whatever you want to name it. And here, I would simply use current result, because we changed current result here, which means 2 lines after that, it's still that changed current result, and therefore I want to add it here to my log entry. Now it's the log entry which I push here onto the log entries array, so that log entry object. And then here I want to log the entire array to my console. If we do this and I reformat my code to use 2 blanks here, 2 white spaces for indentation, if we do that and I now reload, let me again enter any number here, click plus, and now you see here we have an array, and this is just shortened in the developer tools. If I click this arrow, it's expanded. An array with index 1, so with the first element at this index being an object, as you can see. And if we expand this, we see the full object. We see in that object we have a number key with a value of 66, the operation key with a value of add, which is a string, here logged with double quotes because that does not reflect the quotes we used necessarily. Both are available interchangeably, and the developer tools here simply use double quotes. The previous result, and which was 0, and the new result after the operation. And if I add another element here, I get a new array. If we expand this, we see that new element. And if I expand this, we see our second operation where the number was 2, which is correct. It was still an add operation. Before we had a result of 66, and now we added 68. So this is how we can create and use objects. Now, before we use it everywhere, let me show you how you can extract information from such an object, because that's also something you sometimes need to do.